As a lot of you guys know, I am a genius with these trivia questions. I never forget anything, and that's why I know everything. I'm going to go through this quiz here. I'll show you guys how many things I know.
In this video, we'll go over 20 true or false statements about the Burning Crusade expansion, in which I'll give you a prompt, and then you'll have 5 seconds to answer whether it's fact or crap. Then I'll get...
Can I pause it or not? I don't think I should be able to no? Okay, alright, no pausing. No pausing whatsoever.
give you a grade at the end of the video based on how many you got right, so let's get started. One of the best rotations for Warlocks was to spam Shadow Bolt and nothing else.
No, okay, just a minute. That is true, but that could also be false because you did technically have to apply Curse of the Elements before you engage the boss. So it was not nothing else, but yes, Shadow Bolt rotation was true. Okay, I've already gave my fucking answer. I said it's true. Like, I already gave the answer.
Fact. They had a couple of talents and abilities, including a talent that allowed them to sacrifice their succubus pet, which increased their shadow damage by so much that their highest DPS was literally to just spam Shadow Bolt and nothing else.
Those were the days.
TBC is when Blizzard removed magic immunities from bosses and resistance gear from raiding.
No, false. False. You had to have resistance gear for Hydros, actually, in that raid right there.
Crap. There were still some bosses, like the Fel Reaver and Tempest Keep, who were still straight up immune to schools of magic.
Yep.
The Fel Reaver was immune to all poison damage, for example. And some fights still required resistance gear. But the Burning Crusade was the last expansion that had the widespread use of resistance gear, as there was a little bit of it in Wrath of the Lich King and even a tiny bit of it in Cataclysm.
I don't remember that at all.
So it wasn't the expansion that it fully died in.
Okay.
With Paladins and Shamans going cross-faction, TBC was the first expansion with no faction-specific abilities.
False. False. Absolutely false.
Crap. Prior to the Burning Crusade, only Alliance players could be Paladins, but with the addition of Blood Elves to the Horde...
Yo, boys, you cannot forget about Star Shards. Do not forget about Star Shards. That would delete people.
The Paladin class became available to both sides. In an attempt to keep the factions separate, 2 faction-specific seals were added to the game.
Oh yeah,
Alliance Paladins got Seal of Vengeance, and Horde Paladins got Seal of Blood. And oddly enough, the 2 seals had completely different game mechanics. They didn't just have different names for the same ability. Also, all of the priest races had their own specific spell unique to them. And shamans still have faction-specific abilities today, with heroism and bloodlust.
That's right.
The BM Hunter rotation was so simple,
it could used to have a scroll wheel and it would do steady shot and then also kill command. You were able to do 4,000 DPS on Terran Gorefiend because he had low armor because he apparently had like cloth armor or something like that.
Macro to 1 button. Fact. The BM Hunter rotation was basically just weaving in steady shot with auto shots, and using kill command off cooldown, which wasn't on the global cooldown, and making sure their pet was attacking the same target. All of this could be done on 1 macro at the time, and I'll have that macro on screen if you want to know what it looked like. Alliance players organized a widespread boycott of Alteric Valley because they kept losing to the Horde.
No?
Fact. Alliance players on a whole organized a boycott of the Battleground in order to bring attention to Blizzard a major flaw of the Battleground that was introduced with the reinforcements mechanic being added to that Battleground during this expansion. With reinforcements, the Horde could just turtle at Iceblood Graveyard and win every time with almost no chance of the Alliance being able to break through. So to solve this problem, Blizzard moved the Horde starting point further back in the map, which made it a lot more difficult for Horde players to pull off the turtle method. And thanks to all of the other Alliance advantages, kind of balanced out the Battleground and fixed the problem.
It fixed the problem and it balanced it back from being about like 50-50 down to 90-10, where Alliance win 90% of the time, which is obviously the way that it was supposed to work from the beginning. I don't remember this being, like, I don't know, I think this is like, it's very subjective, right? Like, did they stage a protest? I mean, I don't remember, like, a protest and, you know, widespread, like, because I queued AV for the entire expansion. That was like all I did, because I would farm honor points and shit just to get gear. So I don't really know if this one's entirely true, but we'll go ahead and I'll take the L for it. It's okay.
Problem. Well, kind of. The Battleground still kind of favored the Alliance, a little bit more than it did the Horde after that. At launch, some gear from Karazhan, the first raid of the expansion, was worse than heroic dungeon gear.
Big true!
Fact. Some pieces of gear from the first raid of the expansion, Karazhan, were actually worse than some pieces of gear from heroic dungeons.
Wait, that was item 115? Holy shit, that was really good. Damn. Yeah, wow, what the fuck? Why would anybody want the Forest Wind shoulder pads? Those are trash.
So Blizzard put in a buff to the gear later on in the expansion so that it would actually be better.
There it is.
And give people a reason to run Karazhan over heroic dungeons.
Yep.
Before the Burning Crusade, gear didn't have any gem slots in them.
True.
Fact. Jewel crafting was added with the Burning Crusade.
I was so worried that would be like
gear
some kind
with
of a
gem
trick
slots
question.
in them wouldn't have existed before jewel crafting. Guild banks were added to the game with the Burning Crusade. Fact. Before TBC, players would just trade everything with each other, and sometimes they would even have an alt whose sole purpose was to store stuff for the guild.
This is one dude. We had everybody send all their shit over this one dude. He was the guild bank alt. Man, we never saw that shit, dude. That shit was gone. That was gone. Never saw that loot again.
Inscription, and by extension glyphs, were added to the game
no, false.
in the Burning Crusade.
That was Wrath. Sorry. It was Wrath.
Crap. Inscription was added with Wrath of the Lich King. Jewel crafting was added in TBC though, so there was a profession added to the game with this expansion. It just wasn't
Remember the glyph system? Those were
Kel'Thuzad was unkillable when first available because of a massive amount of bugs and over-tuning.
Big true.
Fact, there was tons of them, but some of the bugs are kind of interesting, as one of the bugs was solved by another bug. During the intermission phase, all of the ads that died will come back to life.
Yeah.
But while they were dead, they were still gathering aggro, which meant they would make a beeline for the healers as soon as they rezzed and kill them. And because of this bug, it was impossible to kill Kel'Thuzad. Until one of the tanks found out that the legendary staff, which drops during the fight, generated a tiny amount of threat whenever it was used. And the staff didn't have a cooldown, or even a global cooldown. So they could spam use the ability in a macro like 20 times per press in order to get aggro on all the dead mobs, which allowed them to counteract this bug with another bug. But they still couldn't kill the fight because of a whole bunch of other things wrong with the fight.
This fight was
that
hard.
weren't fixed until an unannounced hot fix later on in the future. The Barbershop, which allows you to change your hairstyle, was added with the Burning Crusade.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would be true. Yeah, patch 2.4.
Crap. The Barbershop was added in Wrath of the Lich King.
Okay. Okay. It came out during TBC. It did. It came out during TBC. The first time I used the Barbershop was in Burning Crusade. Can we just all agree? Can we just all agree that I am right? Look, I'm a very technical person. I'm an extremely technical person, and the phrasing of this question is unclear. So we're going to count this as another win for me. Technically, you're right. I am technically right. And that is the best kind of right to be.
So you couldn't actually change your character's hair for the first two expansions. And then later on, the Barbershop got an upgrade to allow you to change other things about your character. The average hardcore raider needed about 10 different consumables for each raid night, as opposed to the 4 we use today: flask, food buff, potions, and runes.
Yeah, I mean, you'd need a bunch of different stuff, sure.
Fact. Flasks and elixirs could be used at the same time. But not only that, you could also have multiple elixirs up at the same time, along with your flask, food buffs, and a few other random buffs. The normal raid buffs needed for BFA is a flask, food buff, an augment rune, and potion.
And Netflix, so you can watch it on the other screen while you get bored to death while you're doing LFR. So, I remember this shit was so bad. Like, there was one pull because we were going to do Nether Spite, and I wanted to, like, buff myself the fuck up. I spent, like, 300, probably 200 gold on one pull on Nether Spite. I used every elixir. Some dumb fucking bitch in my guild wouldn't stand in the blue beam, or the green beam, or some kind of shit. And, we wiped it. We wiped. I was so fucking upset. Dude, I was about to drop, like, 20k executes on Nether Spite. And then that shit happened. I was furious.
An average raid of about 3 hours or so would require about 3 flasks and a 20 stack of food, potions, and runes. Now, on screen, I'll have a list of the average raid buffs a caster had to bring with them to raid. You could stack certain food buffs.
Yep.
There were a couple of random buffs out in the world that gave you raid DPS increases. Plus all of the elixirs and flasks you had to bring. I would use those all the time. If you were a hardcore raider, you had to go out and farm all of these things for every raid night.
Look at that.
Illidan was the final boss of the final raid of Black Temple. And that's why we have a Black Temple time walking.
No. Sunwell, like, no.
Crap. Illidan wasn't the final boss of the expansion, and wasn't even in the final raid, despite all of the marketing materials for the Burning Crusade featuring Illidan prominently.
Well, yeah, because what happened is they were like, yeah, so when's Wrath coming out? Next year? So what are they supposed to do until then? And then that same guy asked the same thing 10 years later in WoD, and then the guy's like, I don't know, fuck him.
This didn't happen again until Warlords of Draenor, when Grom was promised to be the final fight at the end, and ended up as Archimonde at the last second.
What a fucking disaster.
The first tier of flying mounts only increased your movement speed by 60%, and were very slow.
True!
Fact, the default training of flying mounts only increased your movement speed by 60%.
It was so bad.
And were actually slower than epic ground mounts.
It was so bad.
And really incentivized trying to farm out the gold needed to buy epic flying, which was 280% movement speed.
Yep.
Which was a gigantic improvement to the flying mounts. The first tier of movement speed for flying mounts wasn't increased to 150% until Wrath of the Lich King.
I like that better. I like that a lot better. I wish they did that. I wish they did shit like that now, like, because it just seems like flying mounts, like, I don't know, it's just cool that, I don't know, like, there's just so much, there's so many, like, nuanced special things that the old game had that made it what it was that we don't really have now, and I don't know, it's just like, it's like, you look at the outcome, right, of, like, having to farm out 5,000 gold. I remember I was talking about, like, to Civ HD, about this in Allcraft, and that shit was just so good, man. It was so good. Like, because it caused you to, like, you know, like, go into economy, figure out how you want to make the gold, and because there weren't really a lot of things where you could just farm raw gold, you had to, like, actually inject the economy with some sort of item that would make you money, and that also taught people supply and demand, opportunity cost, price and demand, and everything. I remember very clearly whenever I put up 18 different pairs of fell steel gloves on the auction house, and I remembered halfway through how many warriors that are level 68 are going to buy these in the next 24 hours. And I learned through real effort what supply and demand was. That stuck with me until now. Like, it's weird that, like, you look at, like, the old systems they had, and there were all these, like, unintended, or maybe they were intended, there were all these secondary effects that they created that were just so magical, and they made the game so special.
Which is what it's at today. With flying added to the game, outside of Outlands, you could only fly within major cities.
No, you couldn't fly at all.
Crap. You could only fly in Outlands during the Burning Crusade. All flying mounts would have this little caveat on them stating that they could only be used in Outlands.
Like it should have been.
It wasn't until the revamp of the old zones with Cataclysm that players were allowed to use flying mounts in the old world.
Yep.
But that revamp didn't apply to Silver Moon or the Exodar. And that's why you still can't fly in those major cities even today. With Bloodlust being added to the game in this expansion, it didn't give the sated debuff. So, it could be chain cast by multiple shamans.
True!
Fact.
You would have to rotate shamans into the melee group during combat because you could move people from groups during raid combat. The raid leader would literally click and drag one shaman from group 1 to group 3 to make sure that the melee kept getting heroism. And it was fucking stupid and it was fucking beautiful.
Bloodlust was added to the game in TBC and worked basically like it does today, except it didn't give the sated debuff and only worked on your party members and not your entire raid. So you could chain cast Bloodlust on a party if you had enough shamans in it, which was something that was done by a lot of raids, and kind of the reason they added the sated debuff. Paladins received a taunt ability in TBC, which, with a few other changes, allowed them to tank.
True.
Fact, Paladins didn't receive a taunt ability until the Burning Crusade, which, with a few other changes, like getting a few buffs to their damage reduction, allowed them to actually tank stuff, whereas previously only warriors were viable tanks.
Let me rephrase that. It made Paladins the best tanks in TBC.
With the addition of vehicle combat, the battleground Strands of the Ancients was added to the game.
Wait, no, that was Wrath. What do you mean? Vehicle combat came out in Wrath.
Crap. Strands of the Ancients wasn't added to the game until Wrath of the Lich King. And also, vehicle combat wasn't added to the game until Wrath. But there was little nuggets of Blizzard experimenting with types of vehicle combat with some of the quests you did in Outlands.
Yeah.
The Burning Crusade had more dungeons added to the game than any other expansion.
True. I think.
Crap. The Burning Crusade had 16 dungeons, not including any raids. Wrath of the Lich King also had 16 dungeons added, so technically it's tied for the most.
But if it's tied for the most, then it would still have the most. Like, why they have to get me on these technical? Why can't you just have easy questions? Like, yeah, it's tied for the most? Yeah, well then, it's like you can have two people that are in first place. You know what I mean? It's like if you have a basketball competition for free throws, and you get 10 free throws, and two people get 10 balls in the hole, then they're both first place. They both got the most baskets. No, I'm serious. Like it's not even like it's common sense.
The reason TBC had so many dungeons was mainly because they reused a lot of the same assets for a lot of the dungeons.
That's true.
And some of them are located in little clusters where 3 or 4 of the dungeons were right next to each other.
I like that.
And the point of the game with the most amount of dungeons was Classic WoW, which has like 20 of them, I think.
Big true.
TBC added a new alchemy lab in the Shadow Labyrinth, keeping true to alchemy labs only appearing inside of dungeons.
True.
Crap. The Burning Crusade was the first expansion to have an alchemy lab in a major city, as they added one to Shattrath. Before the Burning Crusade, there were only 2 alchemy labs in the game, one located in Scholomance and the other in Blackwing Lair.
Yeah,
and alchemy labs were required to create flasks. So having one in a major city was a much-loved convenience, before they removed alchemy lab requirements later on in Wrath of the Lich King. Alright, and that's the end of the quiz. I'll have a grading scale on screen to see how well you did. If you got at least 14 right, you pass. I took your feedback from the last one I did and put in a lot less trick questions, so I hope you guys like it.
Yeah, because I kept getting mad.
If you're interested in a Wrath of the Lich King version of this, I'd love to hear some sample questions down in the comments.
Okay. So, let's talk about. All right, so I basically, which ones did I really get wrong? There was like one that I actually got wrong, I would say. I'm just going through all these. Okay, yeah, I mean, I think I got like one of them wrong. Yeah, I got one wrong. This is the only one that I got wrong. Because the other two are bullshit. They're too subjective, and it's hard to say what the answer would really be. Yeah, so I got one wrong. You know what? Let's say the other two that I got them half wrong. So we'll take 2.5s and the 1, and then that's 2. Okay, so I got 2 wrong, which is basically just 1, but I just want to keep the chat happy, so we'll say I got 2 wrong. And I got an A. Obviously, I got an A. I'm I know everything. So this is, the only question is worded really, really badly. Wait, fucking no, it's not. Like, how's that bad? Like, let me look at the question here. The final boss is the final raid of Black Temple. Yeah, that wording is confusing. Never mind. That person's right. Okay. Being tied for first is... Yeah, see, look at this. 2 weeks ago, Zinnik, dude, I'm going to give him a +1. True, dude. Fucking true. Let's see. Yeah, I knew I got it right. Yeah, of course this guy knew. Fucking Matsy. Yo, relax, dude. I'm going to look at it in a minute. Like, give it a break. He said more than any other. No, he said that, but it was the question that you're answering. So his statements about the question are qualifying. So like, I had more dungeons added to the game than any other expansion. Wait, that would make me wrong. Yeah, because if it had more, and it didn't have more than Wrath, yeah, no, I am wrong. No, I'm wrong. No, you're right. You're right. I'm wrong. No, because more, like if two people have $20, one person A does not have more money than person B because they both have $20. There it is.